with more on the current situation. We're joined now by Brigadier Reserve General in the IDF, Amir Avivi, Director of Israel's Defense and Security Forum, former Deputy Commander of the Gaza Strip Division as well. Amir, you know what's going on. You have a good sense for what's happening on the ground in these areas. I've seen some pretty shocking imagery just in the last day, for example, of gunmen, Palestinian gunmen, coming out to the streets in the open, in groups, in daylight. Very brazen. I mean, we haven't seen activity like this, I'd argue, in many years. What does it tell us about, is the IDF not have a strong enough presence out there, or are these armed groups out of control, acting out in ways they haven't in many years?
Well, definitely the situation is completely different from what we saw, I would say, almost in the last decade.
Yeah.
The IDF has been operating for months and months, has been doing a very good job every day, and yet the amount of terror attacks is increasing all the time. This means that something very, very basic has changed on the ground. And what we see is a huge effort of Iran and Hezbollah to move funds to fund terror in Judea and Samaria. We see Hamas and Islamic Jihad getting more and more involved in this area. Everybody is looking at the day after Abu Mazen. This is the main issue. And they're also getting motivated, I would say even by the Israeli government, by the fact that this specific government is talking about the Palestinian state, reviving things that we haven't heard of many, many years. And this gives hope to these terrorists that with force they will be able to impose on Israel some kind of agreement.
I'm glad you mentioned this sort of day after Mahmoud Abbas. I mean, there's nothing official happening on the ground to indicate that may be near, other than his age here, but with no plan of succession, it appears that is playing a factor on activity across the West Bank right now. Is the IDF, in your opinion, planning, or is the IDF playbook focused enough on that day after Abbas, or is it seeming like they're not ready for it?
Well, I can tell you that the IDF is doing quite a few drills, even this year in the Central Command, to try and train for such a scenario. But the problem, I don't think it's the IDF. I think it's more the government, because the government is not really going in depth and thinking seriously about the situation where the day after Abu Mazen, the whole Palestinian Authority will collapse. There will be chaos. There will be a civil war, fighting between different fractions and terror organizations. And we can definitely see a situation where this all fall apart. And Israel
it's a jaw-dropping concept. It's a jaw-dropping prospect, the security chaos that could result in that situation. Is the IDF likely, I mean, we're seeing this now, the intensity of the battles they're encountering out there. New tactics to be deployed. We've heard about the approval for armed drone strikes in the West Bank. Why didn't that happen yesterday, for example, when there were groups of gunmen out in the open shooting at troops?
I think that in an area where there is Israeli ground forces operating on the ground in very close vicinity to terrorists, it's very, very complicated to use drones. And I'm not sure this is the right way to go. It can be relevant in very specific scenarios. I'm not sure that when you go on the ground to apprehend terrorists, this is the right time to use attack drones. I'm not talking about surveillance drones. This is they use all the time. But attack drones is a whole different issue. It's much more difficult to coordinate it when there is a close vicinity of hundreds of meters between the IDF and the terrorists.
Amir, just want to throw something else on. Less than a minute left here, but there was a, as called, less than shining report recently by the government on the status of the IDF, their equipment, their ability to sustain this operation, even in the West Bank. Are you concerned about some of those things in the report, about the IDF's ability right now to deal with what's happening?
Look, usually the IDF knows two basic situations. Either it's in everyday operation or it's in war.
Yeah.
And when you have something in the middle, this makes things complicated, because to sustain a big operation, you need to act in a way and mobilize units that you usually don't mobilize especially in reserve, and act in a way that is very different from everyday life. And
complex
the idea
situation. I'm sorry to jump in on you, Amir. We have a commercial break coming up here, but Amir Avivi, as always, appreciate you with us on the program here. We'll keep following these issues closely, and we'll be back in just 2 minutes more on the program.